This is Brother Medina for Tuesday, Seventh-day Adventist. Good day. Let us start this program with a word of prayer. Loving Father, please be with us and bless us with success, that we may explain ourselves carefully to people and that all may know the truth and glorify your holy name. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Well, today our topic is about republicanism. We are discussing what it means for our country to be a republic. There are different types of republics in the world today, but the particular republic that Trinidad and Tobago follows, the particular brand of republicanism that Trinidad and Tobago follows, is what is known as a Jeffersonian republic. Jeffersonian republicanism. And we want to understand what this is all about. To facilitate this understanding, we will show you a clip in a very short while, and then we will explain ourselves afterwards. But first of all, what is a republic? Well, a republic means the remaking of the public on the basis of justice and equity, or on the basis of a recognition of the inalienableness and the inviolability of the rights and freedom that all men possess. What does this mean? It means you have a public, you remake the public, and you make it on the basis of the rights and freedoms of man. But it is remade on the basis of showing that those rights and freedoms are inalienable, which means it doesn't come from man, it doesn't come from the stroke of a pen, it doesn't come from government, it doesn't come from nature, but it comes from God. That's why you call it inalienable. And it is inviolable. That means they are not to be violated. Those rights and freedoms are sacred and are not to be violated. This is what a republic is all about. And Trinidad and Tobago celebrates republicanism in a very short while. And what we are doing, we are trying to educate you that you would know what you have as a republic. As a republic, our nation is very privileged to have rights and freedoms that are enshrined in the Constitution, that are protected, that these rights are so protected that we can live in a free society. And so, we want you to understand these very important things. So what we are going to show you now is a clip that explains the source of republicanism. It came from America. It is Jeffersonian republicanism. And the source of this republicanism is explained in this clip, and we will look at this clip and see what it tells us, and afterwards we're going to have an explanation. So may God bless you as you pay attention to what we see on this clip.
When Benjamin Franklin exited the Constitutional Convention, he was asked by a woman, "Sir, what have you given us?" His immediate response was, "A republic, ma'am, if you can keep it." Yet most Americans today have been persuaded that our nation's governmental system is a democracy and not a republic. The difference between these two is essential in understanding Americanism and the American system. Before we discuss political systems, however, it's helpful to address the confusion that has been spread about the political spectrum. Many have been led to believe that the political spectrum places groups such as communists on the far left, fascists or dictators on the far right, and political moderates or centrists in the middle. However, a more accurate political spectrum will show government having zero power on the far right to having 100% power on the far left. At the extreme right, there is no government. The extreme left features total government under such labels as communism, socialism, Nazism, fascism, princes, potentates, dictators, kings, any form of total government. Those who claim that Nazis and fascists are right-wing never define their terms. This amounts to spreading confusion. Toward the middle of the political spectrum can be found the type of government limited to its proper role of protecting the rights of the people. That's where the Constitution of the United States is. Those who advocate such a form of government are really constitutional moderates. So let's analyze the basic forms of government. They are monarchy or dictatorship ruled by one, oligarchy ruled by a few, democracy ruled by a majority, republic ruled by law, and anarchy, which is ruled by no one. In discussing these five, we'll see that they can be narrowed down to even fewer. Looking first at monarchy or dictatorship, this form of government doesn't really exist in the practical sense. It's always a group that puts one of its members up front, A king has his council of nobles or earls, and every dictator has his bureaucrats or commissars, the men behind the scenes. This isn't ruled by one, even though one person may be the visible leader. It's ruled by a group. So let's eliminate monarchy, dictatorship, because it never truly exists. Oligarchy, which is ruled by a group, is the most common form of government in all history. And it is the most common form of government today. Most of the nations of the world are ruled by a powerful few, and therefore oligarchy remains. At the other end, we find anarchy, which means without government. Some people have looked over history and found that many of its worst crimes were committed by governments, so they decided that having no government might be a good idea. But this is a mistake, because as the ancient Greeks stated, without law there can be no freedom. Our founding fathers agreed and held that some amount of government is a necessary force in any civilized, orderly society. In a state of anarchy, however, everyone has to guard life, liberty, and property, and the lives of family members. Everyone must be armed, and movement is severely restricted because one's property has to be protected at all times. Civilized people have always hired someone to do the guarding, a sheriff, a police force, or some branch of government. Once law enforcement was in place, the people were freer. They could leave their property, work in the fields, and so on. In short, the proper amount of government makes everyone freer. There are some who advocate anarchy, however, not because they want no government, but because they don't like what they have. They use anarchy as a tool for revolutionary change. The condition of anarchy is very much like a vacuum where something rushes in to fill it. These calculating anarchists work to break down the existing government with rioting, killing, looting, and terrorism. Tragically, the people living in such chaos often go to those best able to put an end to it and beg them to take over and restore order. And who is best able to put an end to the chaos? The very people who started it. The anarchists who created the problem then create a government run by them, an oligarchy, where they have total power. This is exactly what happened in Russia that led to Lenin taking total power, and in Germany where Hitler's brown shirts created the chaos that brought him to power. But anarchy isn't a stable form of government. It's a quick transition from something that exists to something desired by the power-hungry. It's a temporary condition, and because it isn't permanent, we eliminate it as well. The word democracy comes from two Greek words, demos, meaning people, and kratein, meaning to rule. Democracy, therefore, means the rule of the people, majority rule. This, of course, sounds good, but suppose the majority decides to take away one's home, or business, or children. Obviously, there has to be a limit. The flaw in democracy is that the majority isn't restrained. If more than half the people can be persuaded to want something in a democracy, they rule. What about republic? Well, that comes from the Latin, res meaning thing, and publica meaning public. It means the public thing, the law. A true republic is one where the government is limited by law, leaving the people alone. America's founders had a clean slate to write on. They could have set up an oligarchy. In fact, there were some who wanted George Washington to be their king. But the founding fathers knew history, and they chose to give us the rule of law in a republic, not the rule of a majority in a democracy. Why? Let's demonstrate the difference in the setting of the Old West. Consider a lynch mob in a democracy. 35 horseback riders chase one lone gunman. They catch him, and they vote 35-1 to hang him. Democracy has triumphed, and there's one less gunman to contend with. Now consider the same scenario in a republic. The 35 horseback riders catch the gunman and vote 35-1 to hang him, but the sheriff arrives, and he says, "You can't kill him. He's got his right to a fair trial." So they take the gunman back to town. A jury of his peers is selected, and they hear the evidence and the defense, and they decide if he shall hang. Does the jury even decide by majority rule? No, it has to be unanimous or he goes free. The rights of the gunman aren't subject to majority rule but to the law. This is the essence of a republic. Many Americans would be surprised to learn that the word democracy does not appear in the Declaration of Independence or the U.S. Constitution, nor does it appear in any of the constitutions of the 50 states. The founders did everything they could to keep us from having a democracy. James Madison, rightly known as the father of the Constitution, wrote in essay number 10 of the Federalist Papers, "Democracies have ever been spectacles of turbulence and contention, have ever been found incompatible with personal security or the rights of property, and have in general been as short in their lives as they have been violent in their deaths." Alexander Hamilton agreed, and he stated, "We are a republican government. Real liberty is never found in despotism or in the extremes of democracy." Samuel Adams, a signer of the Declaration of Independence, stated, "Democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes, exhausts, and murders itself." The founders had good reason to look upon democracy with contempt, because they knew that the democracies in the early Greek city-states produced some of the wildest excesses of government imaginable. In every case, they ended up with mob rule, then anarchy, and finally tyranny under an oligarchy. During that period in Greece, there was a man named Solon, who urged creation of a fixed body of law not subject to majority whims. But where the Greeks never adopted Solon's wise counsel, the Romans did. Based on what they knew of Solon's laws, they created the 12 tables of the Roman law, and in effect built a republic that limited government power and left the people alone. Since government was limited, the people were free to produce, with the understanding that they could keep the fruits of their labor. In time, Rome became wealthy and the envy of the world. In the midst of plenty, however, the Roman people forgot what freedom entailed. They forgot that the essence of freedom is the proper limitation of government. When government power grows, people freedom recedes. Once the Romans dropped their guard, power-seeking politicians began to exceed the powers granted them in the Roman Constitution. Some learned that they could elect politicians who would use government power to take property from some and give it to others. Agriculture subsidies were introduced, followed by housing and welfare programs. Inevitably, taxes rose and controls over the private sector were imposed. Soon, a number of Rome's producers could no longer make ends meet, and they went on the dole. Productivity declined, shortages developed, and mobs began roaming the streets, demanding bread and circuses from the government. Many were induced to trade freedom for security. Eventually, the whole system came crashing down. They went from a republic to a democracy, and ended up with an oligarchy under a progression of the Caesars. Thus, democracy itself is not a stable form of government. Instead, it is the gradual transition from limited government to the unlimited rule of an oligarchy. Knowing this, we as Americans are ultimately left with only two choices. We can keep our republic, as Franklin put it, or we will inevitably end up with an oligarchy, a tyranny of the elite.
Well, what we are doing, we are having an interview here with the Executive Director of the Tusian Institute of Religious Liberty, Brother Shannon Bartholomew. Brother Shannon?
Pleasant morning to our viewing audience. And thanks for having me, Brother Nayan.
Okay, we want to talk to Brother Shannon that he will give a little explanation about what republicanism is all about. We know that Trinidad and Tobago is about to celebrate Republic Day, and we want to talk about what a republic is all about. Brother Shannon,
Yeah.
would you please tell us, as the director of the Tusian Institute for Religious Liberty, exactly what is a republic?
Okay, a republic. First of all, having a Republic Day, a holiday for being a republic, is a very excellent practice for the country. I think it would be the best holiday out of all the scheme of holidays that we have. Okay, now our republic. What's a republic? The term itself comes from a Latin term, res, R-E-S, and publica, which really means concerning the public, a thing about the public. But when it comes to the definition of it, it would be best to go back to the history of the American Republic, seeing that what they have developed in America is the definition actually of a republic. And that's why we like to use the term Jeffersonian republicanism as the republicanism that we follow.
So what are you saying? Is that there are different types of republicanism.
Yes.
But the republicanism that we in Trinidad and Tobago follow, and the republicanism of the United States of America, is Jeffersonian republicanism.
Yes, and that's the ideal form of republicanism we need to follow.
So, okay, China, let's call it People's Republic of China. That kind of republicanism, is it Jeffersonian republicanism?
Certainly not. It's not republicanism in the truest sense. The term republic is more used like the term nation today, but it's not what a republic is really all about.
So tell us, what is a republic all about? What is Jeffersonian republicanism?
Jeffersonian republicanism is framed according to our rights and freedoms, the rights and freedoms that have been granted to us by our Creator. So the whole system of government is based upon rights and freedoms to allow the creation of a society that will facilitate the liberty of conscience so that God could interact with His creation without hindrance.
So you're saying that a republic exactly expresses issues about rights and freedoms. That's what you're saying.
That's what it's all about. Government is about the protection of rights and freedoms to create a type of society to facilitate what God has to, how God has to relate to His intelligent creation. It's not merely about roads and certain services, healthcare, etc., etc. Those things were added later on. That's not the real issue of government.
So the real issue of government is rights and freedom.
Rights and freedom.
So as we celebrate Republic Day, in celebrating Republic Day, we are dealing with Trinidad and Tobago celebrating the existence of rights and freedoms.
Exactly.
But we will say most countries have rights and freedoms. What about rights and freedoms that is Republican? What does Republicanism say about rights and freedoms?
The purpose of the Republican government is to ensure that whilst people go about their course of life and whatever way they determine to live their life, to worship their God, a Republican form of government is going to ensure that the rights and freedoms of all citizens, both minorities and majorities, are protected in that process.
So what about the statement where we have heard that our rights are inalienable and our rights and freedoms are inalienable and our rights and freedoms are inviolable? What about that? Tell us something about that.
Well, certainly, since the Republican form of government is based on the concept of rights, that it is inalienable, that government didn't give us or grant us those rights and freedoms. The Republican form of government is based or defined based upon that model of rights, that rights are inalienable. It's not granted unto us. The legislature cannot grant those rights unto us. It simply is there to protect those rights and freedoms.
So you are actually saying that the rights and freedoms of man are not given by the stroke of a pen by government. Government does not give us rights. Government merely recognizes pre-existing rights that came from God. That's what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying.
And that is what makes it what? Inalienable?
That's what makes the concept of rights inalienable. That it is given to us by God, and it cannot be granted or withdrawn by government.
What makes rights and freedoms inviolable? What makes it inviolable?
Because it has been given unto us by God. If it had been given unto us by another human being, or a group of beings, or the rulers of a country, then it reduces the inviolability of the status of rights, because human beings who give it can withdraw it as well. But seeing that it has come from God, the status of it is only God can interfere with it. So the status of rights would be inviolable because it has to do with our sustenance.
Okay, so rights and freedoms being inviolable.
Yeah.
We have these charts right here behind. What is why do you have this chart? What is this chart telling us? This chart telling us here? Tell us about this chart.
Well, this is just one of our many charts that will be available to be on display in the exhibition that we will be running at the Dallas Library. The chart has two things in it. It's made up of the coat of arms for our country, and particularly the first part of our preamble of the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago, and of course the motto is in the second part of the chart. So when you look up there, you're going to see section A of the preamble, which says, whereas the people of Trinidad and Tobago have affirmed that the nation of Trinidad and Tobago is founded upon principles that acknowledge the supremacy of God, faith in fundamental human rights and freedoms, the position of the family in a society of free men and free institutions, the dignity of the human person, and the equal and inalienable rights with which all members of the human family are endowed by the Creator.
So this clearly shows us our rights are inalienable.
That's right.
Because it is endowed by our Creator.
Yes.
And the Trinidad and Tobago Constitution clearly shows this.
that in the preamble. And this therefore sets the spirit for the provisions of the Constitution.
Yes, yes. Brother Shannon, I see you have here, which the camera will go down to, your rights. Know them, value them, exercise them, respect them, defend them. Tell us about this.
Well, this is the motto of the Institute, and this says something as to how we should relate to the issue of rights. We should first know them. Upon knowing them, we should come to value them very highly. We should exercise them, respect them, and of course defend them. So this shows the motto of our operations, and it is pieced together with the quote of the Constitution.
Okay, I see also behind you here another chart, and this chart is, could you just turn and look at it a bit? The Tusian Institute for Religious Liberty. Right, the Tusian Institute for Religious Liberty. And it says human rights, the rule of law, equity and justice. A rights think company. Just say something about that quickly.
Okay, well this is our logo. The logo of our institution. It is circular. It has the world behind, given that the mission of our institution is a global mission. The issue of rights is universal, so all human beings have rights and freedoms. So our mission is a global mission. Coming closer, you're going to see we have a gold shield, and the color of gold indicates the faith that we believe in, which is the grounds for the doctrines of rights and freedoms that we hold, seeing that the whole thing is biblical in origin. We have the cross of Christ in the middle of it, indicating that it is Christ at the center of the institution services, because Christianity and human rights comply and is compatible. It's not anti. Human rights and Christianity goes hand in hand. Obviously, you have the law. The law defines the doctrine of rights that we believe in. You have the two eagles flying above the world, a symbol of freedom. You have the scale, which indicates justice, and you have the Alpha and Omega, referring to the Christ being the author and finisher of the faith, the gospel. And of course, down below, human rights is the basis of the rule of law and equity and justice in society. Reason being, we are rights think.
Very, very good, Brother Shannon. And the facts about the whole matter is, my dear people, this is just a small example of what we're going to be seeing more on television. We have just seen the Tusian Institute for Religious Liberty. We see what the Institute stands for with regards to rights and freedoms. And we know for sure this important thing, that when it comes to rights and freedoms, they are inalienable and they are inviolable. Government is just hired by the people to protect those rights and freedoms. Under no authority from God is government given the rights or the authority to take away our rights and freedoms. Yes, God does say certain rights and freedoms can be taken away based upon certain transgressions of the law. But by and large, the rights and freedoms of man remain inviolable. And this is the reason why government must be careful how to treat human rights. Human rights, the rights of man, are what they are supposed to protect. They themselves are not above the law. They are to respect and regard the rights of man and be very careful how they treat human rights. Thank you very much for listening in this section as we go to something else. God bless you. Well, you have seen all of these things that we have shown you. So what can we conclude? We can conclude that in the recognition of a republic, this recognition is the recognition of the Republican principles that a republic stands for. It is celebrating, point number one, rights and freedoms possession when you celebrate a republic. It is celebrating the equal protection of all under law. It is celebrating freedom from tyranny. It is celebrating security for majorities as well as minorities. It is celebrating the importance and self-determination of the individual. It is celebrating the freedom of the individual. It is also celebrating the rule of law that sustains the system. This is what you celebrate when you are celebrating Republic Day. This means quite a lot for all of us. My dear people, we're going to have another program where we explain this even more. But we want you to know so far that we are privileged to have a republic. And we must keep it as a republic. We must watch out for government tyranny that encroaches upon rights and freedoms because they are important to us. Remember, no man gave you your freedom. No man gave you your rights. They were given to you by God. And all your neighbor whom you elect to government is supposed to do is to protect those rights and freedoms. May God bless you as you pay attention to these important points. In Jesus' holy name, amen.